6 Vox Log of Arbites Investigator Relic Salernus, 894, 995, and 41. Well, Jeremiah didn't give us much chance to deliberate. Garn must have slid the locker back into place off kilter or done something to otherwise disturb the room, because no more than 20 seconds after disappearing into his chamber, the lunatic burst right back out. Only this time, he was armed. I've encountered bolt pistols before, but usually in evidence bags after high-profile arms trafficking busts. I've most certainly never had them fired in my direction. Thankfully, I just stepped into my hab cell when Griffin's mole started blasting down the hallway. Blackwater was singing that firm gun of his with the eerie glow up to fire, but not before 2 bolts slammed into his chest, with another 2 going wide. I heard the pair of muffled detonations inside the Corsair's torso and can only imagine the grisly carnage they caused. For his part, he didn't immediately faceplant from the shock, instead squeezing off a pair of shots before plowing into my room and thumbing his signal jammer on. As Draken advanced down the hall, Hire leaned out of his room and fired a stub-automatic at the man's leg. I don't think it did much. I was drawing my auto pistol out of my shoulder rig when Greybass manifested some kind of warp essence that left the traitor dazed and confused. The astropath later explaining that he'd wiped the man's memory of the preceding few minutes. Clearly disoriented, Jeremiah holstered his bolt pistols, thank throne, and dashed for the staircase. My 100-meter sprints were nothing to scoff at back in the academy, but that was almost 20 years ago, and this man disappeared in a blur. Thankfully, Bright Eyes took off after him and caught up at the front entrance out on the street. The rest of us following behind, and a scuffle ensued, with the lair putting a nasty burst of firm energy into Draken's leg, the witch mind-spiking him or something, and just a lot of punching and kicking in general. With everyone dragging him back into the dusty bar, it was effortless to slap cuffs on him and more permanently restrain him. Garn immediately tended to the Corsair's oozing wounds as Maxim and I dragged our Corey's sorry ass over to the same table on which he tortured and slayed Ometh just a few days prior. Our tech savant disappeared downstairs after his Medicaid duties had been fulfilled, and from what I could tell he did a damn fine job to methodically wipe every cogitator in the hideout. But on his way down the stairs, Halstrix appeared at the bottom with a great hulking 2-handed chainsword idling in his grip. I guess the priest has teeth after all. We all talked him down and explained Griffin IV's treachery. Not that he took too much convincing. Seems he hated the guy enough already. I started working on Draken, doing my best to appeal to whatever sense of justice and piety he might have had left, only for him to spit in my face. After rubbing a lit glow stick into his forehead, I asked Greybass to go ahead with his mind delving, which he gladly proceeded to do. He gleaned that our perfidious friend was seemingly working for Grand Prince Frolov, that he had been coming back to the hideout to check for updated orders on his transceiving data slate, that he had been the one who had tipped off Salaworth after our bagging of Ometh, and that he had reprogrammed our shuttle flight path from the orbiting resource platform when this all started. A busy rat, to be sure. Greybass also uncovered partial memories of the name Ninth Zarinthian, something called Operation Platinum, and that his transfer to Cell Griffin several months prior had been arranged by someone senior in the Inquisition. Unable to delve further, it seemed like there was both some kind of mental and physical block inside Draken's head. Ire came back up and gave his dome a thorough physiological scan, which revealed a foreign object of an explosive nature, most likely rigged to detonate should its host divulge particularly sensitive information. We had to get the thing out, while also notifying Norstrike and Marn of the situation after we collectively concluded that they had had no involvement in Jeremiah's deception. Bringing Halstrix along, and with all of our equipment and belongings packed up, we took off in Blackwater's auto carriage for the nearest med clinic. We reached one in a little under an hour, and with a bit of a cover story paired with my falsified enforcer ident, I got the operating theater cleared out for Garn. He opened up Jeremiah's skull, who, mercifully, had had his lights knocked out during the drive, and deftly extracted both the explosive and some kind of worm-like creature grafted to xenotech. Not even Hire could guess at its purpose, and we quickly sealed both objects up in specimen bags. Our witch then pried the mole's now unshielded psyche open again, revealing his origin as the Ninth Zarinthian of the Blessed Cipher, an operative of the Ordo Xenos, sent here to Ramar to disrupt the efforts of the Ordo Hereticus. That is to say, us. I'd have never dreamed that the Inquisition suffered from interbranch rivalries so potent that they'd actively sabotage one another. But I guess that's really just par for the course. People are people, regardless of the organization which they serve. After all this poking, prodding, and probing, Draken expired, much to Halstrex's dismay, though the zealot did take some vindictive pleasure in lopping off the traitor's hands and feet before we stuffed the corpse into an incinerator. Back on the streets, we discussed our plan for the evening as Hilaire drove us toward Sienkov's estate. We opted to try to use Sienkov's infatuation with Baroness von Marius, once again Interrogator Marn, as a means of extracting her and Norstrike from the function prematurely, before a trap could be sprung that might snare both of ourselves. Blackwater, recognizing the high stakes of tonight's coming operation, also made a request to the rest of us in Sphinx. Should he die, he wants us to notify the rogue trader Marius Moon's fleet of his passing, and also pass along mention of his affections and adoration to a one Diaspora, a dark Eldar Xenos embedded in the trader's retinue. I guess they weren't kidding when they say you can't choose who you love. Making a short detour, we also picked up those two goons that our dear officer of commerce had swindled in a game of dice behind the storefront several days ago. Apparently they're in his employ now, and he proceeded to assign them as getaway drivers for the auto carriage once the rest of us entered the Grand Prince's palace. Upon meeting up with Prince Sienkov at his residence, we were ushered inside his personal limousine, as our own car joined the convoy of the noble's security detail. 4 vehicles in total. During the drive, Blackwater tried pitching the idea of arranging an intimate rendezvous with Elias. But the prince, surprisingly, turned him down, talking instead about his excitement at the prospect of cinching several lucrative business contracts at the ball. He was unequivocally lying, and kept shifting his gaze around the interior of the carriage at what I soon realized were probably the various Vox and picked recorders embedded throughout. Passing through several checkpoints, the escort cars, including our own with Halstrix inside, peeled off, and we observed the composition of the security forces shift from various house militias to members of the royal family's guard. Disembarking amongst a throng of noblemen and women doing the same, we proceeded inside the main hall before finding an empty table close to the entrance. Looking around, we spotted Enos and Elias, wearing the same finery that they had left the hideout this morning in. Disentangling ourselves from Sienkov almost at once, we moved over to the Griffin operative's table, where Norstrike, now styled as a Void Lord, appeared rather surprised to see us. Blackwater took over inconspicuously communicating what needed to be said to the pair, though Marn was still behaving strangely, as I moved on and started brief conversations with other attendees. One such individual was Strakops the 12th, magnate of the gunmaker's dynasty himself, who I found seated nearby. He seemed terribly disinterested in the gathering, and I got little out of him save for a business card. If he has any knowledge of his goods being appropriated by Sallaworth and his ilk in order to arm the labor riots, I couldn't tell. A short time later, Astra Militarum officers, or at least their Romarian equivalents, began filtering out of rooms behind the main hall. I approached one such commissioned man as he began tucking into a grok steak, the insignia on his uniform and the ciphers on his shoulder boards, betraying him as the regimental commander of the 2,224th Light Infantry. Asking him what he and his colleagues had been up to, he admitted to the presence of a kind of officers' club in the rear chambers. Suddenly getting to his feet, his cryptic conversation with Blackwater now seemingly over, Baron von Marius strode over to another nearby military officer and proceeded to stumble onto him, his drink spilling and dousing the man in bubbling anisec. A scuffle quickly ensued, drawing the attention of nearby guards, and Hilaire rushed by me as he whispered to follow him through the now unwatched clubroom entrance. Glancing over my shoulder as I hastened in pursuit, the last thing I saw was young Prince Iosif Sienkov making his way over to the now vacant seat beside the memory-wiped interrogator. In Vox Log.